I want to start with something that you have talked about in the past, about thinking about how you lead Johnson& Johnson as a 132-year-old startup. What does that mean to you?
We're a unique company in that we've got this over 130-year legacy. Everybody knows things like baby shampoo, Band-Aids, these wonderful brands that we have. But to stay relevant, to stay competitive, we've got to be reinventing ourselves every single day. So we've got to have this mindset that we are constantly in a startup mode. So if we're not constantly innovating, if we're not relentless on our search and our outreach for new ideas, new technologies, new science, we just can't help touch patients and consumers the way that we need to. You know, it's interesting, Dr. Paul Janssen, who is the founder of Janssen Pharmaceuticals, a company that we purchased back in the 1960s, probably one of the most prolific drug discoverers of all time. He had a reputation for walking around the labs every morning and saying, "What's new?" And that's the same kind of spirit, the same kind of inquisitiveness that we try to stimulate and cultivate in our employees and our leaders each and every day.
So how does that work in practice?
Well, it works by, one, the example, the expectations set by the leadership.
Do you walk around asking what's new?
Absolutely.
Can you walk through what you have done to make Johnson & Johnson's culture accepting of breaking down these silos, and then also how you take that out to the market?
Absolutely. Well, it starts with keeping the patient, the consumer, in the center of everything that we do. Because in the end, the patient, they want to feel better. They don't care whether it's a pharmaceutical, they don't care whether it's advice, they don't care whether it happens in the hospital or the acute care setting. They want to be well, they want to be able to live a healthy life. And so what we try and do is bring that same attitude to everything that we do at Johnson & Johnson. It starts by arranging teams. You know, for example, yes, we're still organized by our pharmaceutical group, our medical device group, and our consumer group. But we've realized for a long time the convergence of bringing a much more holistic approach was going to be essential if we wanted to truly realize the full potential of Johnson & Johnson. We've tried to take that same mindset to our customers. What we're seeing now is hospitals, healthcare systems, and others, they're just under so much pressure. And they're also looking for ways to say, rather than paying on a per instrument or per bill basis, how can we move to an outcome where, gee, how is the patient doing? And from the moment the patient comes in, what kind of experience do they have? How do you engage with them? How can you better predict who might need a surgery or not? Again, it's still early days, we're learning a lot, but I think it holds a lot of potential and is very consistent with where healthcare will go and must go in the future.
As you're doing this internally, are there lessons for other leaders? Are there things that you have learned, mistakes you've made on the way, or successes that you've had?
There are times when good ideas just don't percolate up. But you have to go out and you have to listen, you have to engage. But then once you have that idea, there are a few times when you've got to say, this shall be our top priority.
And that's a top-down decision.
Exactly. And then frankly, rally the organization around that. Because it won't just happen on its own, particularly when you're trying new models and you're trying to branch out. Now, I think you have to be thoughtful about that, because what I don't want is everyone looking and waiting for a top-down answer. 90% of our ideas need to be driven from those who are closest to the patients, the consumers every day. And frankly, we are there just to remove obstacles and to support them. But occasionally, it's critical that you step in and say, here's a new way to help break through. I think that's number one. Number two is, just like anything else, you got to make sure it's resourced. You got to make sure that you've got the right leaders in place, that you put your best and your brightest in those situations, and you tell them, I've got your back. Because otherwise, what's the incentive to go take on and take that kind of risk? And I'll tell you, the rest of the organization watches. They watch what you say, but more importantly, they watch what you do.
You became CEO in 2012 after a pretty tough time for Johnson & Johnson, a series of very public recalls. This is a well-trusted and admired company, and now you had to rebuild trust and rebuild the brand slightly. 6 years later, how has that impacted how you lead the company or how you think about where Johnson & Johnson is going?
Well, I think the most important lesson through all that I learned is how important and how relevant our credo is to everything that we do. And I know as I stepped into the role, one of the things that I wanted to, reaffirm for the organization was the importance of those principles, of that value system, of that true north in everything that we do. That was our number one mission. In fact, we had every employee in the organization go through a credo challenge in small groups of maybe 10 to 15 people, talking about how it was still relevant, what it meant to them, what it meant to their individual roles and responsibilities, and sign their name and put it in their area. And I think that's been a primary driver of a lot of our success, since then, in making sure that, we stay on the right course.
I know you guys just recently did a study with Tufts about this. Would you talk a little bit about what you're studying, what you're looking for in terms of employee wellness and what you've discovered?
What we find is that when people really feel that they have a purpose, where they really feel that they're doing good for somebody else, where they're making a difference in people's lives, that is a huge energizer. Now, in addition to that, we think that as the world's largest, most diverse healthcare company, we should also be the healthiest company in the world. And it starts with our Human Performance Institute. And the whole idea is...
This is an institute in Florida that you own?
That we own, a subsidiary of Johnson& Johnson that we got into more than 10 years ago. And look, as part of our aspiration to have the healthiest workforce and to help our people be their very best, what we have done is take the core components of HPI and we build it into support systems for our employees. They actually undergo 360s, not only with their work colleagues, but with their family, their husband, their wife, their children. I'll tell you, it was very eye-opening for me to get that kind of feedback. Give them simple, straightforward tools, some in person, others online. And what we find is when people go to this course, they actually do better in our company. And that's what this tough study that you just referred to confirms, is that they find that people who really have a purpose in life tend to be happier, tend to do better. And I think it's pretty intuitively obvious that would be the case, but it's great to see research supporting that.
Does it change how you manage? Are you someone do you send emails out at 11, midnight, 2 in the morning, asking people to do things? Are you working on the weekend?
I mean, every chance I get, I talk to our employees about taking care of themselves. I've also learned, one of the things I learned at HPI is when you walk in the door at night, put the iPhone down, put the mobile devices down. It's going to be there later on. The last thing in the world I want to do is walk in after not seeing my wife or son or other family members and be completely distracted.
Do you do it?
I do it. I put
night.
It down. I don't have it by my bedside when I sleep at night. And and it helps me again stay focused on what's really important. And even, you're right, you talk about emails on the weekend. I tell all of my colleagues in Johnson & Johnson that, look, over the weekend, if you receive an email from me, that unless I have urgent associated with it, you don't need to get back to me until the following week. Now, I might use different times during my weekend to get some work done because it's convenient for me at that time. But I think it's important that people know that you respect and that there's an expectation that they're not on 24/7.
You came up through sales. How does that inform who you are today?
Well, it was an incredibly meaningful place for me to start. I mean, prior to that, I served in the Army, and it was my entry point into a great organization like Johnson & Johnson. And I've got to say, starting in the industry, having to learn the science, really learning about customers. And again, I didn't do that vicariously. I was with them every day, seeing how they were dealing with patients, with their office management staff, with dynamics in a hospital. And seeing that firsthand was an incredibly important, foundational, building block for me in my career. And it's something that I would encourage for everybody.